Radio Raheem here with the chairman. You need no introduction, Bob Arum. We're at yet another Pacquiao fight. Pacquiao versus Bradley, April 9th. You were up there, and I felt like there was some emotion coming from you when you started to talk about this possibly being Pacquiao's last fight. That's understandable. When he told you that, what was the first thing that you felt?
Well, I wasn't disappointed because if his first thing is going to be politics, then he has to do that as well, if not better, than he did as a boxer. And if a political career will interfere with him boxing in the future, so be it. I mean, he's a young man, maybe not a young man as far as boxing is concerned, but a young man, and he has to look as to what he's going to do for the rest of his life. So I'm all in for him. Whatever he wants to do, I'm going to support, of course. And so when he told me this would be his last fight, I took that with a grain of salt. But if it is his last fight, I'll acknowledge what a great ride it has been and concentrate on my other fighters who are coming up, like Terence Crawford and Gilberto Ramirez, Jose Ramirez, Felix Verdeo, Oscar Valdez. There's plenty of them.
Now, that's spoken like a true friend, but we all know that you're a promoter as well, if not first. So when we look at Manny Pacquiao's contract, there appears to be 3 fights left on the contract. Is that something that doesn't concern you? You're willing to let him out of that contract should he desire?
It's a contract for a boxer. A boxer, an athlete, can retire whenever he wants. In other words, he has no obligation to me to continue fighting if he decides not to fight legally. So, of course, he's a friend of mine. And even if he wasn't, again, you have contracts. It's not like he's breaking his contract to go and fight for some other promoter. If he's retiring, he's retiring. That's fine with me.
Now, as there is with, many fights, there's always the critics. When we saw this fight coming together, we knew Pacquiao was coming back in 16. People thought Crawford would be a likely choice. Khan was the first words people spoke. How did we settle on Timothy Bradley?
The distributors didn't want Crawford. They didn't think he was known well enough, and they thought that Khan was flawed. So they didn't want him either. So Bradley was the one that they almost unanimously picked. So I told that to Manny, and he went with it.
I asked Manny if he was feeling good, if he was able to look good, if even knocked Timothy Bradley out, the shoulder's solid. Was there any chance that he may fight one more? He didn't say no. If that were to be the case, would you sit down and try to get one more out of him?
Well, if he wants to fight after this fight, that's up to him. Of course I'll promote it. But that's, again, up to him. And that's why, people said, why don't you advertise this as Manny's last fight? I say, I'm not going to do it because I'm not sure it is his last fight.
We both know that at the post-fight press conference for Bradley Rios, Terence Crawford was almost already congratulated for having the Pacquiao fight. You've told us why that didn't happen. Now he's fighting Lundy. How long is it going to take for Crawford to get what's considered a great challenge? With no disrespect to Lundy, it seems like he's already outclassed that level of opponent.
Well, he's going to fight, if he beats Lundy, once more in June or July, and then I'm going to look to do a pay-per-view fight for Crawford, a big fight. We'll see what's available, and we'll go accordingly. If Manny beats Bradley and decides he wants to keep fighting, then Crawford is the perfect opponent.
The boxing pay-per-view king's throne, I guess you could say, is still somewhat up for grabs. Oscar feels like Canelo is the heir apparent to that throne, that he's got the best fighter in the game. Who do you feel is your strongest potential in a fighter, and how do you make sure that your fighter and one of your fighters in your stable is the pound-for-pound pay-per-view king?
Well, it doesn't interest me who's the pound-for-pound pay-per-view king. The question is, do we have athletes who can compete on pay-per-view and have enough people buy the fight to make it worthwhile? If Canelo, for example, who is a big attraction, if he does 800,000 or a million buys, and say Gilberto Ramirez fights Golovkin and does 500 or 600,000 buys, that's a great showing. And I'm not comparing it to Canelo. Canelo is somebody who exists in his own parallel universe, and the more interest he creates in pay-per-view, the better for all of us. So there's no competition that way. There's competition if they're going after the same thing, and they're not. It's just they sort of both can build. So, you know, Oscar thinks that Canelo is the biggest pay-per-view attraction. I know he is a pay-per-view attraction. Fine, there's no problem with that.
At this time, the fans, and where I live, online, in the newspapers, on the TV, the fans are constantly playing a shell game with the promoters. Who's got the best stable, who's in the best position. But they often don't understand the full complexity of the business of boxing. Obviously, you've got a lawsuit against Al Haymon. It's moved forward, and I've seen debates all over the place as to what that means and what this lawsuit is based on. So can you explain in somewhat layman's terms, first of all, what the lawsuit's about and what this most recent judgment means?
No, because all those arguments are made before one person and one person only, and that's the United States District Judge. And what other people think or don't think is relatively irrelevant. So I'm not going to argue the case in the press. That would be wrong. And also stupid, because if I say something that's not quite accurate, they can pick up on it and use it against me. So no, that case will be argued by competent lawyers in a court of law.
Then let me ask you a broad question that's not directly related to the lawsuit. How has Al Haymon's new model and spreading these fights across different networks back to, you know, network television, cable, all these shows, changed the game of boxing, and is it for the better or for the worse?
The question is what he's done violate the United States antitrust laws, and that'll be decided in a court of law. Whether it's been good for boxing or not good for boxing, or good for Haymon or not good for Haymon, that'll be determined, and that the people will be able to see for themselves. I'm just interested in the legalities on the ground.
And lastly, Bob, obviously Haymon's not the only somewhat new promoter in the game. We've got Roc Nation. You saw the Cotto Canelo fight, and now it seems like Roc Nation's having an issue getting good fighters for opponents for their fighters. Like, they're not really able to make the fights that are interesting. Is that a promoter you're willing to work with? And if so, have they approached you? Has anything like that been in discussion?
Well, they haven't really approached us seriously. We would certainly work with them if it was advantageous to us. But so far, there haven't been any real talks. And as long as they don't violate the law, they're entitled to promote who they want, when they want. You know, it's, again, I don't look at what the other guy is doing. I look at what I'm doing and whether my business is being run correctly. You know, what they're doing, good luck to them. I only wish them well.
And lastly, Bob, in a perfect world, how does Manny Pacquiao retire in 2016? And what is Top Rank's most, potential fighter that you would like, if not to replace him in pay-per-view king, to carry that torch, that mantle, the face of Top Rank?
Well, right now, if Manny Pacquiao retires, he retires. And he goes on to, I think, a glorious political career in the Philippines. We have a lot of candidates to replace Manny Pacquiao. It's not going to be easy. Manny Pacquiao has done extraordinarily well on the world stage and on pay-per-view, but certainly Gilberto Ramirez could be one, Jose Ramirez, Oscar Valdez, and certainly Felix Verdejo. And then, of course, you got Terence Crawford, who some people think is a pay-per-view star already. I don't think quite yet, but he will be. There's Jesse Hart in Philadelphia. A lot of guys, who knows, if people really understand boxing, they'll rally behind Lomachenko, who's probably the best fighter out there, technically. So we'll see. We'll see. I've been in this business 50 years, and I've learned not to make crazy predictions.
Well, we appreciate your time. Been in this business 50 years, started when he was 2 years old on Muhammad Ali's lap. Radio Raheem with the chairman of the board, top ranks, Bob Arum. Thank you, sir.
Much.